from Morocco that Rabbi Jaffe is showing us right now. If you don't have that, it's really not a big deal. What I'm using is a combination of, I've got about a teaspoon of paprika, and then I took part of a jalapeno pepper and minced it up. I'm going pretty easy on the jalapeno just because of the customers who visit my restaurant nightly are not such big fans of really spicy food. But you could alter this to the taste of the people in your family. And you could leave it out completely if you don't like spicy at all. But harissa, the idea of adding harissa to this dish is to add a little bit of depth and spice. I've got 6 eggs, and then when the dish is finished, we will garnish it with about a ½ cup of crumbled feta and some sort of roughly chopped cilantro. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move you over here to my stove that is reasonably clean. Don't look too closely. So I've got I would say a medium stainless steel skillet, and I'm going to heat that up with about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And first we're going to cook our onions. And all we're looking for, can everybody hear me okay? Yes? Okay, good. So all we're looking for here is to just cook them down a little bit. We want them to be translucent. We're not really looking for a lot of color on this. And I've just got this on, I don't know, I would say medium-high heat. And so I'll mention to you that when we get to, just while we wait for our onions to cook down a little bit, when we get to our pita, I'm curious to know if anybody has their pita dough all ready to roll. Yes? Great. Okay, so I'm going to show you 2 different ways to cook the pita. I'm going to sort of give you a choice. So you could cook it in the oven. And if that's your plan, I would preheat your oven now to about, to exactly 450. And you're going to either heat it with a sheet pan in there, or if you happen to have a baking stone, you could heat that in there now. And the other way, if you don't want to do it in the oven, is to do it on the stovetop, and I will show you how to do it. I've got a big cast iron skillet. So in a little while, we will put that on the fire and really, really crank that heat. I find that the oven, the stovetop, you get a wow factor that you don't get in the oven. It's a little bit more exciting. The oven tends to be a little bit more consistent and reliable just in terms of actually getting the pita to puff. So you could try it both ways. You could go one or the other. All right, so my onions, and just force of habit, I'm moving my hand constantly. You don't have to do that. You could leave your onions alone. So my onions are starting to soften a little bit. They're starting to get a little bit translucent. We're going to give it just another minute here. We can sort of help it along by putting the salt in, because salt helps draw the moisture out, and it helps the onions sweat a little bit to get them going. Okay, so I think I'm pretty good here. I'll let you see what we look like. So we've got, they've begun to cook down. They don't have that real raw look to them anymore. They're sort of translucent around the edges. So I'm going to add my cumin, my paprika, my garlic, and my salt I've already added. You might turn down the heat just a tiny bit because we don't want anything to burn. And I'm only going to let this go for about 30 seconds. There's a very fine line between garlic that is kind of perfect and garlic that went too far. It's like a matter of seconds. Burned garlic is is a sad addition to a dish. Somebody has a question. Do we have enough dough to try oven and stove? Yes, you are going to make 8 pita rounds. So you could do corn 4. You could do 1 and have it fail and then go to the other method, whatever you want. All right. So now I'm going to add my tomato paste, and I want to just cook that down a tiny bit. Those of you who are cooking at home, your kitchen is already smelling great, right? Okay, and then the last thing that goes in here are the canned tomatoes. We're going to turn the heat way down at this point. So we're looking to simmer, and this is going to simmer on a fairly low heat. You want a really gentle simmer for it. This will end up going for about 10 minutes. And or until we're done making our pita dough. All right. So we look like this. Is everybody good at this point? My onions still need a little time. Totally fine. Keep going. Keep going with your onions. As you can see, there weren't so many steps between onions and simmering sauce, so you should be good. All right, so I'm gonna let my sauce simmer, and now we're gonna go and get going on our dough. Is everybody good? Oh, the harissa, I'm sorry. Yes, the harissa is in now. So when the tomato paste, when I put in the tomato paste, that's when you could have also put in your harissa. And I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. All right. So I'm going to just press on. If you're still working on your sauce, you're good. You will be able to catch up. So the pita dough, is really a very, very simple dough. What you should have ready is about a cup of warm water. So that's just gonna go right into my bowl. And I'm using instant yeast, so I don't have to dissolve it ahead of time. If you're using active dry yeast, you're gonna wanna add it to your warm water and let it sort of hang out for about 5 minutes or so, or give it a very good stir. It really doesn't matter if you're using instant yeast, it can go right in. In fact, it could even have gone in with my flour. But so I've got 2 teaspoons of instant yeast and 2 teaspoons of kosher salt. Now I wanna make an important distinction. So kosher salt is coarser than table salt. And as a result, it's less salty, for lack of a better way to describe it. 2 teaspoons of table salt will make your pita way too salty. So if you're using table salt, I would probably not even do a whole teaspoon. I would do like a scant teaspoon or 3/4 of a teaspoon. But if you're using kosher salt, 2 teaspoons is gonna be just right. So 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, 2 teaspoons of instant yeast, and 2 teaspoons of olive oil into my bowl. I'm just gonna give it a quick stir. And what we're gonna start with is 2.5 cups of flour in with this mixture. This is definitely a dough that you want it to be as sort of wet as possible while you can still handle it. So you could go as high as 3 cups, but if you don't have to, I guess is what I want you to keep an eye on. So we're gonna start with 2.5 cups in the hopes that that's all we need. But if we need to add a little bit more, we'll go up to 3. So I'm gonna add all 2.5 cups here. I'm gonna use my spoon first, and it's not gonna be pretty. It's going to be a really shaggy dough. It's going to be a mess, but we're going to keep at it, and we're going to just keep kneading it until it becomes smooth and elastic. And once our dough is kneaded, it will hang out for about 45 minutes to an hour. The reality is you probably could cook your dough after about a half an hour and it should come out fine. Better to let it go longer. But if you're in a hurry, you could probably cook it after about a half an hour. All right, so I'm gonna get rid of my spoon. I wanna show you what this looks like. So it's a shaggy mess here. And I'm gonna start out by kneading it directly in the bowl, just to save mess on my counter, honestly. And so the kneading technique, this is just for all bread that you're kneading, is you wanna kind of fold it back towards you and push it away. And this is a fun one to get the kids involved in, if you choose to. Kids like to knead. Okay, so I'm gonna move mine to the counter now, and I'm gonna work in these sort of little bits that were left over in my bowl. And I'm folding it and pushing it away, folding it and pushing it away. You could also, oops, sorry, I missed a question. How much flour did you add? I added 2.5 cups. So I think I listed in the ingredient list in my recipe, I say 2.5 to 3 cups. I'm gonna try to stick as closely to 2.5 cups as I can. Today is a wet day, so it could take a little bit more flour, but so far this is looking good to me. And what we want is for it to just be smooth, elastic, and not sticky all over our hands. Can I use crushed tomatoes? Do they need cooking? Crushed tomatoes should be fine. And you want to give your sauce, I should mention, in the 10 minutes or so that it's simmering, you want to give it a stir every once in a while, which I'm going to do. Hang on. It's looking really good and it smells, I wish you could all smell. It smells really good. Do the crushed tomatoes remain whole? Crushed tomatoes are crushed. If you wanted to use whole canned tomatoes, what you would want to do is put them in a bowl before you begin cooking and sort of crush them up with your hands. All right. So I don't know how easy it is for you to see, but my dough it's looking pretty good. I think I could knead it for another minute or so just to smooth it out. And then what you're going to want to do, so this is sort of what we've got. What you're going to want to do is transfer it to a clean bowl that you're going to just oil lightly. And then what you do is the ball of dough goes into the oiled bowl and you sort of roll it over. So you have oil on your bowl and you have oil on the top of your dough. And then you're gonna set that aside with either a piece of plastic wrap over the top or a kitchen towel. And that's gonna hang out for about an hour. At this point, you could also, so after an hour, you could cook it, or if you wanted to, you could actually put it back in the refrigerator and kind of keep it there. And it could really stay for several days, maybe even a week. And if you wanted to make just like 2 pitas, 3 pitas at a time, or double this recipe and just pull out the amount of dough that you need for a meal, you could always pull off a couple of balls of dough cook them and leave the rest in the refrigerator so you have really fresh pita every time you want, anytime you want it. So after an hour, that will be ready to divide. And what you are going to do is divide your dough evenly into 8 pieces, which I have already done. So you're gonna end up with eight balls of dough about this size. And you can leave those after you've divided your dough into 8 pieces. You could just leave them under, I'll show you. I've just got them sort of hanging out here under a kitchen towel. How do you know when you're done kneading? Could you knead too much? You really can't knead too much. And the truth of the matter is, as long as your dough has really come together, because you're gonna let it rest and rise for an hour, any sort of minor imperfections will sort of sort themselves out as it sits and proofs. One thing that I will mention is that oftentimes we say when your dough is right, it almost is sort of feels like your earlobe. So it's as elastic and soft as your earlobe. So you want it to feel really smooth. You don't want it to feel super bumpy. You don't want it to feel crumbly. And you also don't want it to be so sticky that you just like, it's sticking to every surface and you sort of can't work with it. If it's a little bit sticky, that's fine. You're gonna just dust your counter or whatever surface you're kneading on with a little bit of extra flour. It looks good. Everyone looks good who's working with their dough. I think you're in good shape. So I'm gonna take a step over here to our shakshuka for a minute, and we're gonna get our eggs into the pan. And while those cook, that takes about 8 minutes because they cook really slowly. So while those are cooking, then I'm gonna show you what we're gonna do with our pita dough. Unless I need to give everybody a couple of minutes who has dough ready to catch up with your 8 balls. Yes? Those look good, as long as they're even. So you're gonna, you cut your dough in half, and then you'll cut each half in half, and then you'll cut each of those pieces into 2, and then you'll end up with 8 pieces. I can do culinary math. It's the only kind of math I can do. All right, are we ready to shift gears for just one quick minute? Yep, okay. So here is the shakshuka sauce, which can we just agree it looks really good. And it smells fantastic. So what we're gonna do is one by one, I'm gonna sort of dig a little bit of a hole and crack an egg. So I've got 6 eggs. So basically as I work my way around, I'm gonna make little holes, pop in an egg, make another little hole, pop in an egg. You'll see what I'm doing as I go. All right, so I've got this little well, and here comes egg number 1. And if possible, you're gonna try to avoid disturbing the yolk, but it's not the end of the world if you're not able to do that. And I'm gonna change spoons. So here I'm gonna have a neighbor. I'm gonna make a little hole. And in comes egg number 2. And egg number 3. And here comes egg number 4. And I should have mentioned from the start, I'm sorry, I'm just remembering now, you want to use a skillet that you can put a lid on, because our next step is to cook this covered. Okay. And here, oh, get back to your hole. Okay, here comes egg number 5. This is not the fastest, but here we go. And then I'm gonna do one more right in the middle. And then what we're going to do is sort of cover the whites a little bit, because basically what we want is for our whites to cook more than our yolks, because we want to have a delicious, if you're into that sort of thing, we want to have a delicious runny yolk at the end and a perfectly cooked egg white. All right. So we're going to spoon a little bit of sauce on top of the whites. So that just is a matter of sort of some folding. All right. So hopefully you can see. Can you see into my pan? Can, right? All right, I'm kind of just gently suggesting to the whites that they get underneath this sauce. Okay. All right. And now I'm going to put a lid on it. And that's going to cook for about 8 minutes. We're going to check it in 8. It may take as many as 12. And I'm just, for the sake of our camera situation, I'm actually going to move it to a different burner and heat up my cast iron skillet. All right, so I've got this on a relatively, I would say medium low is where I have the eggs, and my cast iron I'm gonna make really as hot as I possibly can. Okay, so back to our pita. Hi. So you're gonna take a ball of dough and with a rolling pin, we're gonna roll it out to a disc that is about, I don't know, 8-ish inches. All right, and first I'm going to show you what happens in the oven. And then I'll show you on the cast iron skillet. All right, so if you can get your pita to be perfectly round, I will be impressed. I will also say that if you cannot, it doesn't matter. It does not change the taste of this. And I think a rustic look is nice. That's what you'll say. You'll say you meant for it to be like that, rustic. All right. I don't know if this is 8 inches, but I'm calling it 8 inches. So it's gonna look a little bit like this. And if you're cooking it in the oven, what you're going to do, all right, ready? Here's a move. Let's see if this works. Okay, I'm putting it on my floor. Can you see my oven? Yes, I think you can. Okay, so it's gonna go into the oven directly. I have a baking stone in my oven. You may have a baking stone, you may have just a hot baking sheet. It goes right onto the stone. Okay, so my oven is 450 and so is my stone. So that goes in and it really takes about a minute. Hi, it takes about a minute for it to start to puff, and it will be fully cooked at about 3 minutes. So there's nothing to see here yet. Okay, in the meantime, I will show you what happens in a cast iron skillet. Hi, this is really hot. Okay, that was scary. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of oil to my skillet, just like a drizzle to keep things from sticking. All right, and I'm gonna grab another round of dough. Sorry, I'm not bringing you back while I roll this one out. All right, and this goes directly on to my skillet. And in my experience, I would say that sometimes this puffs on the stovetop and sometimes it doesn't. And the reality is that pocketless pita is also good. It's delicious. You just might not end up with the hole on the inside, but that's fine. You don't really need that for your shakshuka anyway. So we're gonna let it go for about a minute on one side. And then we're gonna flip it. And what we're looking for on side number one is for it to begin to bubble, which it's starting to do, and I'll give you a sense of when it's like really ready. So you wanna wait, you don't wanna flip it just as the bubbles begin to appear. You want them to be pretty good size. In the meantime, I'm gonna show you inside the oven just how our pita is starting to puff. I think you can see that. Can you see that? So it's starting to puff up. It's not there yet. All right. So this guy is beginning to bubble up a little bit. I see a few. So I see a good bubble starting here. I'm gonna flip it because I also see that on the underside, it's got some nice color on it. It's beginning to puff. It's sort of hard to see. Sometimes I've also found that if it's not really cooperating and not puffing up well on its own, you can press down gently with a kitchen towel, and sometimes for some reason that encourages it to puff a little bit better. Let's see, does the cast, oh, how thick should the pita be? The pita should be like the thickness of, I don't know, maybe like a scallion pancake. Thin. You want it to be really thin, not paper thin. I will roll out one more and I'll show it to you sideways so you can see the thickness. So I'm gonna just give this guy a press and see if that helps encourage it to puff. This might just be one that doesn't want to puff, but our friend in the oven is puffing. I'm gonna flip that one over just to toast it on the bottom. And we're gonna let it, so they take, I would say they take about 3 or 4 minutes a piece. The nice thing about the oven is that you can cook more than one at a time. When you're doing it on the stove top, it doesn't always work that way. I can also see that my egg whites are beginning to cook over here, but they're not there yet. So we're gonna let this go. It says I have a minute left for 8 minutes. It looks like it's gonna be probably closer to 12 until those are ready. All right. This guy, I would say, is almost ready to roll. The other thing that's nice to do with this pita, in addition to obviously eating it as a side dish or as to sort of sop up all the saucy goodness with our shakshuka, is you can keep these, make a whole big batch, keep them in your freezer, and use them for pizza, which we actually did in our house the other night. Make little personal pizzas. So this guy didn't puff because he knew he was being filmed. But you can see it's very pita-ish in its appearance. So we've got nice toasting on both sides. And you can, to keep them warm, you could just keep them on a plate, wrapped in a kitchen towel. I'll show you, this is one that I made. I don't know why I'm holding the tongs because it's cold. This one I made in the oven a little while ago, and it's rip into it for you so you can see it has this, it has a pocket, a real pocket. Legit pita. But so to keep them warm, you just wrap them in a towel. All right, so I'm gonna grab this pita. So this is what our pita from the oven looks like. We got a nice puff on that one too. Is anybody cooking along at home, having success? That looks good, Rabbi Jaffe. All right. So we could sort of, you know, you can continue to roll out So I'm going to roll out one more so I can show you roughly how thin it should be. Meantime, I'm going to turn up the heat on my shakshuka a little bit, see if I can get it to cook all the way for you. All right, so this was a slightly smaller ball of dough. No puffing in the oven. Are you cooking it on a sheet pan, Leia? You are. And you had it in ahead of time. You did. It's temperamental. Sometimes it just doesn't do it. And sometimes it's like making pancakes, you know, the first one doesn't cooperate and then after that it will. You may also need to cook it a little longer. Does it taste good? Good. Well, that's what we care about, right? Okay, so I would say this is the thickness that we're going for. So it's pretty thin. Does that help? All right, so I'm gonna throw this one on my stone. 1 second. Okay, and I'm gonna let you have a peek at our shakshuka. So that is looking really good. So what you want is for the whites to have just turned opaque and white. And that way we know that our yolks are probably, you know, just barely runny. And we're gonna garnish this with our feta and cilantro. So let me just move some of my mess out of the way and let you have a look at what I'm doing. And certainly you can skip these garnishes if not everybody in your family is a fan. All right, but this is our finished dish. And I'm actually sadly, I'm only going to put feta on half of ours because I have a feeling that some members of our crew may not be fans. But I would encourage you, and this is like, we're keeping it real here, people. This is my family's actual dinner, so I have to make it the way they'll eat it. But if I were you, I would put feta all over the whole thing, and then you're gonna sprinkle with your cilantro. And that's our shakshuka. I recommend serving it in like a big, wide, shallow bowl and giving everybody a pita to go with it. You could have a salad on the side, but you don't really need too much else. And that's that. Okay, let's see. Let me check my last pita that I'm going to show you today. Oh yeah, pita perfection. Whoops. All right, so that's what we're hoping for. I could have actually let that get a little browner. I think I'm gonna throw it back in. But I got excited about the puffing. I think we've done it. I've done it. Has anybody else done it? Are we good? Does anybody have other questions?
I'll jump in. Thank you. This is, if anyone wants to see, this is what the much less professional looks like. Over there, the shakshuka, I did half feta as well, if anyone didn't want it. Suzy, you can critique.
That looks good.
And the pitas I got 2 here, and others going. My pita popping abilities are not commensurate with yours. But
I think it's
okay.
cool. I think
it's
it's
good.
good.
Anyone else out there? Leah, Lonnie, how's yours looking? I saw you're cooking at the same time. Julie Byrne, I see you're cooking as well. How's anyone else doing? Screen pictures?
You getting any puffing, Julie? A little puffing? Okay. Are you doing stovetop or oven? Well, you're muted.
I was doing both.
You were doing both?
Suzy, when you do it on the skillet, when you put the oil in the skillet, there's a lot of smoke. Did you also open up windows or turn off your smoke alarm?
I did not. But
Maybe
that might be.
My smoke
that's
alarm
just
went
my
off.
fault for
Your smoke alarm went off? Yeah. I'd maybe turn on the vent fan.
Yeah, I've had all the windows open. So while we're finishing up here, I just want to so shakshuka, Suzy, do you? My favorite local shakshuka. I don't know if anyone else goes out to eat this, but when we are allowed to go back to restaurants, my favorite local one is Art Cafe in Nyack. Wonderful little Israeli restaurant that has really good. They have 2 different kinds of shakshuka that I get there. Anyone else have any favorites? Or Suzy, do you have one? Or anyone else want to type into the chat box? Any place else would you like to go for some good shakshuka?
I mean, it's not exactly local, but I used to very much like to have the shakshuka at Miriam in Brooklyn. So it's still even around. So if you want to,
I've had it also at there's an Israeli place called 12 Chairs, which is in Brooklyn, as well as one in Tribeca as well. And they have a really good one.
But now we all can make it ourselves.
Alana Treven is asking if you want to add spices to the dough, when should we do that?
Oh, dried spices?
Leah, Alana, you want to unmute yourself for this?
Like if I wanted to add za'atar or a little extra oomph to the dough.
So I would add that, I would add za'atar in with your flour.
Okay.
But the other thing that you can do, because I'm thinking that you're maybe thinking about the pita that's has sort of a crust of za'atar on it at the end.
No. I was just. I mean, that's amazing. But
the other thing you could do is, as it's coming out of the oven, you could brush it with oil and sprinkle za'atar and salt.
Okay. Cool.
But yes, if you wanted to knead herbs and spices or
herbs, right?
with the dough, I would do that from the very beginning with the flour.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
And Suzy, when you feed this to kids, how do you choose to plate this? How do they like to eat it? Do they put it together with holding it with the pita, one piece at a time to scoop up? How do you introduce this to your kids?
I'm gonna have to get back to you on that, as this will be my children's maiden voyage with shakshuka.
Wow.
But my guess is that a bowl and a spoon is going to be the way to go.
Interesting. Well, the key to shakshuka is that you're not supposed to eat it with utensils. You're supposed to take your pita and scoop out a bit like that.
Yeah.
And this is the way that Jews traditionally ate. This is why on Passover you ask, why do we dip this night 2 times? It's because they had to make a difference from how Jews usually ate, which was to dip once. And think about an Ethiopian restaurant where you take the bread and you dip the food and you eat that and the bread becomes the utensil. That's the same idea here. This is a North African Jewish dish, so it comes from that same idea.
Well, perhaps I oversold it a little bit and made you think that my children actually would use the utensils that I handed to them. So perhaps they're just very religious and I didn't know.
Very good.
Maybe that's it.
We're celebrating
about table manners, but
we're celebrating Israel's birthday, and when Israel was first founded and the first settlements of Aliyah were coming, the European Jews, the Ashkenazim, were overwhelmingly trying to teach the Mizrahi and the Sephardi Jews, the Jews of North Africa and of the Middle East, to do away with their savage ways and to start using utensils. And they would send them to finishing schools to do that, to stop eating hummus and pita and other primitive foods such as that. So it's ironic that these days what we celebrate most in Israeli cuisine is exactly that type of food, like shakshuka.
very cool.
All right.
All right.
Good. Does anyone else have any questions? So we're gonna, this is recording and we can keep the recording of this afterwards if people want to refer. I see some of us are cooking live and some of us are watching to hopefully cook later. For those of you who are cooking, if you want to send, text me or Suzy any pictures of your shakshuka when it's done, I would love to see it.
Yes.
So I'm going to put my email here in the box, and I don't know, Suzy, if you want to type in yours as well, but
Sure.
it'd be great. Now, as we're finishing and as you're typing, I'm going to give a heads up for next week. And for next week, I thought I saw David Traven walk by in the background, so this might be for him as well, that next week, as it is the last cooking session before Mother's Day, Suzy is going to do us all a favor and is going to do a special session intended primarily for dads and children to be able to make the perfect Sunday morning. If you can't take your mom out for brunch, and what can you make for her at home, and be sure to clean afterwards. So Suzy, do you have anything else you want to say about what we're going to be making to teach all of us dads, us knuckle-dragging cooks, how to do this in the kitchen?
I would say since we're going to do the class on Thursday, it will be something that is make-ahead and freezer-friendly.
Oh, that's great. So,
So they can make it on Thursday and then whip it out on Sunday.
So just take a look, keep posted on our website. We're going to send out and in our coming attractions the ingredient list so you can shop ahead for it again, just like today. And I just want to again thank Suzy so much for doing this. I hope that your kids really enjoy it. Let us know how it goes. And for all of you cooking at home now or for recording for later, please do send it to us and enjoy it in the celebration of Israel's 72nd birthday. So thank you so much for joining us. Suzy, can you hang on for a moment or two if anyone else wants to unmute and ask any last questions?
Sure, of course.
Great, so I'm going to unmute everyone here. People want to drop off, they're welcome to. And if you want to hang out for a little bit and see how things go, so with that, unmuting.
Thank you. Suzy, I have a question about the pita dough. If I'm going to make it later, do I put it in the refrigerator?
Yeah, so let it rise for that hour, 45 minutes. Basically, you're looking for it to get sort of puffed, and it's not going to quite double. It will look like it has risen. And then
So probably by the time I'm cooking it, it'll be doubled. So I probably can just leave it on the counter then.
Yeah,
With the cloth over it.
for sure.
Thank you. I'm excited.
We're good.
Suzy, can I ask a question?
Sure.
My actual shakshuka looks a little watery. Should I let it like run off a little bit? Here, I'll show you.
Let me see.
Is that okay, or is that a little too watery?
Right. So let's see. Here's
Try to
what I
just cook it off and let it steam?
Yeah, you know what I think you ought to do? Take your eggs out and then crank your heat and let it cook down, just because you don't want to overcook your eggs. So
Got it.
rescue your eggs and then crank the heat up without a lid
Okay,
and let it reduce. And I think you'll be in good shape.
I'll give it a try. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Suzy, I already ate one and they were delicious.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I ate a pita while cooking. It's really good. Thank you.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
I'm curious to know what kind of salt.
Who is playing piano in the background? And maybe you want to mute your phone, whoever has piano going on in the back? Thank you.
Someone's playing a TikTok.
Oh, it's Irene's spirit.
Yes. I'm sorry about that.
No, please. It's only fitting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Suzy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Suzy.
Sure, but say Avon.
Bye.